My name is Thorben Wieditz. I will be talking about the rise of the platform economy and of global corporations like Airbnb in the accommodation sector. The work that I'm presenting on is work that I have done as part of Unite here in Toronto over the last couple of years, in 2016, 2017. And in 2018, since January 2018, I've been with Unifor, and I'm continuing this kind of work, but focusing more on the hotel conversion aspect of hotels being under conversion threat in the downtown core mainly. And this is a presentation that I have given with Steve Tufts last week, actually, at a labor conference in Montreal. So, I hope that I will be able to sort of pack it into a 15-minute time chunk and leave some space for questions and discussions at the end. So, everyone, like, who in the room here knows what Uber is? Obviously, it's an easy question. Who in the room here knows what Airbnb is? Who in the room here has used Airbnb? Who in the room here has used Airbnb as a traveler and tourist? And anyone here that has used Airbnb as a host, renting out their home? That's usually what happens. I think a lot of people know Airbnb from traveling and from using it as a way to find a cheap place to stay somewhere. Fewer people actually have experience with renting out their apartments, their condos, or their homes with a company like Airbnb. So just to back off like one step, Airbnb is a what some describe as a platform corporation, a peer-to-peer network. It's essentially a website that mediates the relationship between a traveler, a guest, and a host that offers accommodation in the form of either a room or an entire home or condo. And Airbnb is a company that is valued at this point at $31 billion. In 2000, it's only 10 years old. It was founded in 2008, and it pretty much didn't exist in the city of Toronto in 2010. In 2010, the city of Toronto, had about 80 listings, meaning that it was pretty much negligible. But over the last couple of years, the inventory that Airbnb offers in the city of Toronto has risen to what we see now at almost 18,000 listings, meaning that the city of Toronto has undergone a drastic change in the sense that a global platform, a corporation, is able to utilize housing stock in a city that is in dire need for housing as hotel inventory, essentially. So in 2010, those 80 rooms that Airbnb listed represented about 0.3% of the entire lodging supply in Toronto. And lodging supply, I mean hotel rooms and Airbnb units. In 2018, today, this percentage has increased to 41%. So Airbnb now is responsible for 41% of the entire lodging supply in the city of Toronto. And you see this little dip here. This is when we were campaigning around regulation for Airbnb in the city of Toronto. And this rise here is from the point that we actually, and I will come to it in a minute, established a set of rules and regulations that were then appealed to the Ontario Municipal Board, no LPAT. And during this appeal period now, where everything is on hold, we see listings skyrocket again in the city of Toronto. Just so, like, I'm a geographer by training, so I kind of like maps and looking at maps. This is sort of what it looks like when you look at what Airbnb has to offer in the city of Toronto. And why this matters is because if you look at the hotel room supply, and I'm talking here from the perspective of Hotel Workers Union and members of ours that rely on a steady supply of tourists coming in and booking hotel rooms. So the downtown hotel room supply has remained stagnant from like about 2000 until 2015. There are about 25,000 rooms. So Airbnb now represents 17,000 listings, and if you break it down, you will see that Airbnb offers what's called shared rooms, private rooms, and entire homes. Entire homes can be anything from like a bachelor condo apartment to like a 3-room condo, a rental apartment, or an entire house. So the entire home category sort of subsums all of these. About close to 3/4 of the listings and the inventory that Airbnb offers falls within this entire home category. And by September of 2018, so basically 2 months ago, there were about 5,400 entire homes that were basically used full-time as what we call ghost hotels, essentially illegal hotel suites that are offered full-time, every day, and rented frequently. So, and we have to contextualize this within the context of not only a changing labor markets in the sense that we get these disruptors coming in and wreaking havoc with like established sectors and incumbent industries, but also within the context of a generalized housing crisis in the city of Toronto, where we have 100,000 people on a waiting list for affordable housing, where we have vacancy rates in neighborhoods of less than 1%, where if you want to rent an apartment, which I recently had to move, and in order to find a new place to live, like you literally have to apply as if you were buying a house with like credit checks and all kinds of like letters of references, employment letters, and like it's like literally a portfolio you have to hand to some agent that works for a landlord that then gets to decide whether or not someone gets an apartment. It's absolutely insane. So within this context, having Airbnb rely on homes to be turned into essential illegal hotels it's a problematic in Toronto that impacts a lot of people. But talking again from the perspective of a hotel workers union, the concentration of Airbnb in Toronto is pretty much very classically sort of located in core. These are hotel rooms. This is a downtown core, obviously. If we look at where Airbnb generates its revenue, it's literally, those are 140 neighborhoods in the city of Toronto. These are the neighborhoods that count for Airbnb. These are the neighborhoods that are located at the subway lines. These are the neighborhoods that have already been gentrifying for the last 25 years. And these are the neighborhoods that are close to the existing hotel district, close to the waterfront. And why that is, it's because Toronto has undergone a drastic condo boom over the last 20 years. We have built hundreds of thousands of units, and these units are essentially like ready-made hotel suites. So all those, those commercial operators, all they have to do is, visit IKEA, furnish it, and then rent it out as a hotel room. So, and these places are located in the downtown core, right next to hotels, and they're unregulated. Essentially, right now they're illegal. There is no bylaw in place because even though it has been approved, it's on hold. And Airbnb is able to avoid, the labor laws, the tenancy protections, health and safety laws, all kinds of set standards and regulations that everyone else in the industry, in the accommodation industry, has to follow, but Airbnb does not. And people describe the company as someone that exploits regulatory loopholes. So within this gray area, Airbnb is able to flourish in the city of Toronto and puts an enormous pressure not only on the housing market but also on the availability of or the use of hotel rooms in the downtown core. So Airbnb's narrative is always one of like the cultural exchange, and the host meets a guest. And when I asked you earlier, like no one here has been renting out a place, so that tends to be the case that there are very few people that actually engage in this face-to-face meeting of like tourists and renting out their own home. It's much more likely that we see something on the right-hand side where you end up with commercial operators that store the keys to their units in a lockbox and give you like an elaborate explanation of how to receive your key when you enter your building, or when you come to town and you want to reach your Airbnb unit. We did some research last year that showed that 16% of Airbnb hosts in the city of Toronto operate what's called multiple listings. That's 2 to, I think the top host has by now more than 62 units, by the way. But it's like this minority of hosts that basically not only generates the majority of the revenue, but also is responsible for almost 40% of the entire inventory that Airbnb has to offer in the city of Toronto. So there's this clash between Airbnb's narrative of helping out like people that are in financial need and that need to occasionally rent out their own home to make like a modest amount of income a year to help them get by. While this is certainly the case, and there's like, there are like 84% of hosts that maybe fall in this category that make what Airbnb says less than $5,000 a year. But there's also the trend, what we call the ghost hoteling, where you have 16% of the host community, be in charge of 40% of the inventory, generate more than half of Airbnb's revenue. So this is obviously a very important category for a platform like Airbnb, not only in Toronto, but in all major cities around the world, in New York, in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, in Paris, in Amsterdam. The story is always the same. And what we have done in 2016, we have formed a coalition called the Airbnb Coalition, which was a coalition led by Unite Here. That included tenants associations, residents associations, neighborhood groups, local activists, housing folks. And we were campaigning on the issue of housing, essentially. We were stressing the impact that Airbnb has on Toronto's housing market. And we would hammer down the impact that it has in the media for like 2 years. And we were able to get a lot of press on this issue, and we sort of added a number of other factors that the media likes to report on, which is crime and safety and these kind of things. And there's a lot of like party house activity. So what that meant is that we were able at City Hall to actually speak to a broad variety of the political spectrum. We could talk to councillors on the left, we could talk to councillors on the right. Everyone understood the importance and understands the importance of the housing market and the need to protect the housing market from companies that essentially extract the wealth in Toronto, are structured in a way that they don't pay corporate tax in Canada. They are headquartered in Ireland with 40 subsidiaries around the world in tax havens. But nonetheless, they extract the wealth in Toronto and they don't leave anything behind in terms of housing stock. I think that everyone understood that. What also helped is that in a lot of the tonier neighborhoods and the wealthier neighborhoods, people were upset about the party house phenomenon, where you have like entire homes and houses rented on the weekends to groups of partiers that they disliked in these neighborhoods. So it meant that on City Council we were able to actually address the issue across the board and ended up with a regulatory framework that we initiated through reporting and the outline of sort of model legislation that was approved in December of 2017 in an almost unanimous vote. Most of those there's only one left now in council. It's Kerry Janis, I think Cressy and Mamolini are luckily gone. So it was an almost unanimous decision that was immediately appealed and is on hold now, so we have no regulation in place. At the same time, what is happening now is that we see more and more hotels being turned into residential condos. So, and that the problem with that is that in the downtown core, that already has a limited hotel room supply, as we've seen, we have about 12 hotel properties that are under conversion threat. We're losing about 4,000 rooms, 2,500 jobs are under threat. At the same time, there are no limits to the amount that Airbnb can offer. So there is no incentive to investors to reinvest into hotels to build more hotel rooms. But B, the problem too is that as the hotel supply dwindles in the core, the demand for Airbnb units goes up, and the pressure on the housing market to turn residential housing into ghost hotels increases. So we need a policy response to address this.